Welcome to this deep dive. You've given us quite the reading list on the subject of happiness. Looks like you're really trying to unlock that secret formula. We've got excerpts from Daniel Gilbert's Stumbling on Happiness and Shawn Achor's The Happiness Advantage.
Absolutely.
Don't worry, we're not going to quiz you on the finer points of hedonic adaptation or anything. Instead, we're after the good stuff, those surprising insights about happiness that you can actually use in your life.
It seems like you're on a mission to crack the code on happiness, and these two authors offer some intriguing and often surprising perspectives.
Okay, so you're not going to make me define hedonic adaptation, are you? Because honestly, I think I skimmed over that part.
No worries. We're after the good stuff, those aha moments that you can actually use. And one of the biggest takeaways from both these books is this. We're kind of clueless about what will actually make us happy.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
You're saying we're bad at predicting our own happiness?
It's true. Gilbert calls it the impact bias, this tendency we have to overestimate how much something, good or bad, will affect us in the long run. Think back to the last time you were up for promotion. Remember those intense feelings, the thrill of potentially winning, the fear of losing?
Oh yeah, I can practically feel the knot in my stomach right now just thinking about it.
We convince ourselves that landing that promotion will be pure bliss, and if we don't get it, utter devastation. But the reality is, as Gilbert points out, our brains are incredibly adaptable.
So you're saying even if I didn't get the promotion, my happiness levels would eventually bounce back?
Exactly. The same goes for negative events. We think a breakup or a job loss will make us miserable forever, but over time, we tend to return to a relatively stable baseline of happiness.
It's kind of reassuring, actually.
It is, but it also makes you wonder why we put so much pressure on these external markers of success. Like, if money doesn't buy lasting happiness, why are we all so fixated on it?
Well, isn't that the million-dollar question?
Right.
Literally.
Right. And Achor dives right into that one. He calls it a cultural myth, this idea that's passed down through generations, and he connects it to our evolutionary history.
Now, that's interesting. Are you saying our desire for financial security is hardwired into our DNA?
Essentially, yes. Think about it. For centuries, having more resources meant a greater chance of survival, more food, better shelter, and passing those advantages down to your children.
It was all about securing the future. So on a deep level, we're still wired to seek out those resources even though we're not living in caves anymore. It's like our brains are stuck in an evolutionary impact bias, overestimating the importance of resources even when our survival isn't on the line.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? We've created a world where, for many, basic survival isn't the primary concern, yet that ancient drive for more persists. This helps explain why people in wealthier countries often work themselves to the bone, earning more than they could ever realistically enjoy.
It's like we need a software update for our brains, one that's a little more aligned with the realities of the 21st century. But where do we even start? If we can't rely on our predictions about what will make us happy, then what can we rely on?
That's where things get really interesting. Both Achor and Gilbert suggest that instead of trying to predict the future, we might be better off looking to the past. Not our own past necessarily, but the experiences of others.
So you're saying instead of trying to figure out how something will make me feel, I should look at how it's made others feel.
Exactly. Gilbert has a name for it. He calls it vicarious observation. Now that might sound a bit technical,
Just a bit.
but it's something you do all the time. Think about how you check restaurant reviews online. You're essentially using others' experiences to predict your own enjoyment.
That's such a good point. I do that all the time. But doesn't Gilbert also say that we're not always great at learning from those experiences? Like we remember things differently than they actually happened?
Exactly. Our memories aren't perfect recordings. They're influenced by all sorts of things. For instance, Gilbert talks about how we tend to remember experiences based on how they ended, even if the overall experience wasn't that great.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Are you serious? So even if I had a terrible time, if it ends on a good note, I'll probably remember it more fondly.
You got it. Gilbert uses this example of a study where people had to submerge their hands in ice water.
Okay, that sounds unpleasant.
It was. Some people had their hands submerged for a shorter time, while others endured a longer duration. However, for those who endured it longer, the water gradually warmed up at the end.
Okay, so even though the longer trial involved more overall pain, if the ending was less uncomfortable.
People actually rated it as the better experience, and get this, they were more likely to choose to repeat that one even though it meant more pain overall. It's wild.
That's crazy. It's like choosing to watch a movie you hated just because it had a happy ending.
Yeah.
Our brains are so weird.
Right. And Gilbert says This tendency to focus on the ending, on the most recent information, can really distort our memories and influence our decisions.
So if our memories are flawed and our predictions are often off, how do we make better choices that actually lead to happiness?
Well, that's where Achor's book offers some really practical advice. He's all about taking action and making small changes that can have a big impact on our happiness.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the good stuff.
One of his biggest ones is the power of gratitude. Now, I know this might sound a little woo-woo, but hear me out.
No judgment here. I'm open to anything at this point.
Achor says that consciously focusing on what we're grateful for can actually shift our perspective, making us more aware of the good things in our lives. And there's actually a lot of research to back this up.
Wait, really? So just by writing down a few things we're grateful for, we can actually trick our brains into feeling happier?
It's not just about tricking your brain, it's about training your mind to focus on the positive. Studies show that practicing gratitude can lead to increased happiness, improved sleep, and even a stronger immune system.
Okay, that's impressive. But how do you actually practice gratitude? Do you just sit around making gratitude lists all day?
A gratitude list is a great starting point, but Achor suggests incorporating it into your daily routine. Maybe start each day by thinking of 3 things you're grateful for, or write a thank you note to someone.
I can see how that would shift your perspective, especially first thing in the morning. You're basically setting the tone for a more positive outlook throughout your day.
Exactly. And it's not just about gratitude lists. Achor also talks about the importance of small positive actions. He believes that even seemingly insignificant things like smiling at a stranger or doing a random act of kindness can create a ripple effect on our own happiness, as well as the happiness of those around us.
I love that. It's those pay it forward moments. You do something nice for someone, and it inspires them to do something nice for someone else. It's like this chain reaction of positivity. But does Achor really believe that something as simple as a smile can make a difference?
He does, and there's a scientific reason behind it. He explains it through mirror neurons, which basically means our brains experience a mini version of what we see others experiencing. So when you smile at someone, you're giving their brain a tiny boost of happy chemicals and likely getting one yourself, too.
Wow, that's amazing. But if we're constantly surrounded by negativity, won't that have the opposite effect?
Unfortunately, you're right. Achor talks about how negativity can be just as contagious as positivity. He even mentions a study where researchers found that working for a toxic boss could actually increase your risk of heart problems.
Oh, tell me about it. I once had a boss who could suck the joy out of a room with a single email. Talk about a happiness killer.
It's rough. But on a more positive note, we can actively choose to focus on the positive and even encourage a more positive environment around us.
I like the sound of that. So it's not just about changing our own habits, it's about influencing the people around us too. But how do we do that, especially in a high-pressure work environment?
It's definitely a process, but Achor offers some great tips for cultivating a more positive and supportive workplace. For example, he emphasizes the importance of recognizing and rewarding positive behavior.
It's like the old saying, what gets rewarded gets repeated.
Exactly. If we want to see more of those positive actions, we need to acknowledge and appreciate them.
That makes sense. But what about those inevitable moments when things aren't going our way? When we're facing setbacks, disappointments, even failures. How do we stay positive then?
That's where Achor's concept of the third path comes in.
The third path. What's that?
It's this idea that even when things get tough, even when we feel like we've been knocked down, we still have a choice in how we respond.
So instead of going into victim mode, we look for ways to learn and grow from the experience.
Exactly. Achor tells this incredible story about a psychology experiment that was done with dogs. They were put in a situation where they received electric shocks, and some of the dogs had the ability to stop the shocks while others didn't.
Oh no, poor pups. So one group had a sense of control while the other felt powerless.
Exactly. And the researchers found that the dogs who had control over the shocks were much more resilient. They were better able to cope with the stress even when they were later put in a situation where they couldn't control the shocks.
Wow, that's powerful. So it's like that experience of having control, even if it was just for a little while, made them tougher in the long run.
Precisely. And the takeaway for us is that by focusing on what we can control, our thoughts, our actions, our responses, we build up our capacity to handle those curveballs life throws at us.
So it's like building up those mental muscles. So we're more equipped to deal with challenges when they inevitably come up.
Exactly. Now, both Achor and Gilbert emphasize this idea of control, but it's fascinating how they approach it from different angles. Achor is all about taking action, while Gilbert dives into the psychology of how our brains perceive those actions.
So even if we can't always control what happens to us, just believing that we have some agency can make a difference.
Absolutely. Gilbert says our brains are wired to find explanations, to make sense of the world around us. And when we can connect events to our own choices, even if it's a bit of an illusion, it gives us a feeling of order, of being in the driver's seat.
It's like we become the authors of our own stories. I like that. But what about those times when we really are up against a wall, like a major loss or a setback? Can we still find that sense of agency then?
Achor addresses this head-on with his idea of falling up. He believes that even in the face of adversity, we have the power to find opportunities for growth.
Falling up. I love that. So instead of letting those difficult experiences break us, we look for the lessons, the growth opportunities hidden within them.
Exactly. He tells this incredible story about a time he was doing research in Zimbabwe shortly after a period of major political unrest. He was working with students who had been through some incredibly tough times, and he worried they wouldn't connect with his message of happiness.
Because they were dealing with such harsh realities.
Yes. But he was blown away by how engaged they were, eager to learn about ways to improve their lives. It was then he realized that even in the face of true hardship, humans have an incredible capacity for resilience.
That's really inspiring. It's like in those moments when we're forced to confront a challenge, we discover this well of strength and resourcefulness we never knew we had.
Exactly. And Acker believes we can actually cultivate that resilience by choosing how we interpret those challenging experiences. Instead of seeing them as defeats, we can choose to see them as opportunities for growth, for learning, for becoming stronger.
So it's about consciously shifting our perspective, finding the silver lining in the midst of those storm clouds. That's easier said than done sometimes, though.
I agree. It takes practice, but Aker talks about developing an optimistic explanatory style as a way to retrain our brains. It's about learning to see setbacks as temporary, isolated events rather than permanent reflections of who we are.
So instead of thinking, I messed up, I'm a failure, you'd think, okay, this didn't go as planned, but what can I learn from it? How can I do better next time?
Exactly. And he suggests simple practices like keeping a journal to document successes no matter how small, to remind yourself of what you're capable of achieving.
It's like building a case file of evidence to combat those negative thoughts and self-doubts. I love that.
It's a powerful tool. And one more thing that both Gilbert and Aker emphasize is the importance of connection. Our relationships, our support systems, they're essential for navigating the inevitable ups and downs of life.
It's true. When you're feeling down, having someone to talk to, someone to lean on can make all the difference.
Aker describes our support network as an offensive line, shielding us from some of the harder hits life throws at us. And Gilbert points out that by sharing our experiences with others, we gain valuable insights and perspectives that we might miss on our own.
It's like we're all in this together, part of this collective human experience, sharing our stories and learning from each other along the way.
Exactly. And by tapping into that collective wisdom, by allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and open to support, we create the conditions for greater happiness and fulfillment in our lives.
This has been an amazing deep dive. It seems like happiness isn't about reaching some picture-perfect destination, but more about understanding how our minds work, rewiring some of those outdated thought patterns, and choosing to focus on the positive.
It's a journey of self-discovery, and the most exciting part is it's a journey you get to create.
So for anyone listening, what small step will you take today to nudge yourself in the direction of greater happiness? Remember, even a small shift in perspective can make a world of difference.